We come now to the programme motion. The Minister to move formally. Thank you. The question is the Finance Bill Programme Number 2 motion as on the order paper. As many as are that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Finance Bill as amended in committee and in the Public Bill Committee to be considered.
Now, sir.
Thank you. Order. We begin with new clause 5, with which it will be convenient to consider the other new clauses and amendments listed on the selection paper. To move, I call Mr. Roger Mullin. There's been a change of personnel from that reveal to the office. Kirsty Blackman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Apologies that we didn't get the correct name into you on that. I rise to speak particularly to new clause 5, which is in the name of myself and my honourable friends, but I want to just give a brief mention to Amendment 162, which is being put in by the Labour Party, and just to note that I look forward to hearing them speak about Amendment 162, and if they do intend to push it to the vote, then we'll join them in the lobbies on that one. New clause 5 is about the corporation tax treatment of the oil and gas industry. Madam Deputy Speaker, you won't be surprised to hear me speaking about the corporation tax treatment of the oil and gas industry. Indeed, it's something I've spoken on quite a number of times. What we're asking for is a comprehensive review to be undertaken on the corporation tax rates and investment tax allowances applicable to companies producing oil and gas in the UK or on the UK continental shelf, and we're asking for a review of this report. This is a really timious ask from us for a number of reasons. For a start, the finance bill that we're discussing today implements measures that were put in place and discussed first in February and March prior to the EU vote, and there's not been any substantive changes by the government to the bill as a result of the Brexit vote. I think that we really need to be looking at making substantive changes to the bill because we find ourselves in a completely different situation because of the fallout from Brexit. I think it's really unfortunate that these changes haven't been made and that there hasn't been more announcement from the government on how they are going to manage the financial situation going forward. So I think that's incredibly unfortunate. The other thing is, in terms of where we are now, in terms of the oil and gas industry, and particularly the impact on both Aberdeen, where I represent, and actually the UK's tax take to the Treasury, I think it's really important now that we're seriously considering making changes. We have been asking repeatedly for changes to the tax rates. We've been asking for a comprehensive strategic review, and we do appreciate that the government did make changes earlier this year, but we don't think that they go far enough. I just want to have a brief quote from Alex Kemp, who is a renowned petroleum economist, and is also his long-term research partner, Linda Stephen. They're both at Aberdeen University. They've been working on sophisticated modelling tools, and if the Minister hasn't read this article that's produced in Energy Voice today, I think it would be worth reading along with the report that goes along with it. The work that they've done suggests that the corporation tax of 30% is too high, and that it's far above the non-North Sea rate. They've also said that from the analysis of the economics of new field investments and exploration in current circumstances in the UKCS, it is clear that at $50 and $60 prices, there are many marginal project investment situations. Now, that's really key, and that's something that we've been arguing. It's actually really nice to have more of a backup from renowned experts on this. It really bears repeating the position that the industry finds itself in now. So, estimates vary on this, but we've lost around 125,000 jobs. We started at about 425,000, we're down to about 300,000. Now, that is a massive number of jobs. That's a huge reduction in, for a start, the tax take to the Treasury, if that's where we're coming from, but it's a massive hit for the local area, particularly in Aberdeen, but across the wider Scotland and across the other oil and gas producing areas. So, because of the changes, because of the reduction in the oil price, we've seen companies changing their behaviours. We've seen them making changes. So they've made a number of people redundant. They've changed the shift patterns, for example. They've changed terms and conditions. They've also managed to reduce production costs, which is a good thing. So absolutely.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Brexit casts further uncertainty over the oil and gas industry, which under this Conservative government has had the legislative goalposts almost continuously moved, thereby hindering vital investment. Does my honourable friend agree that giving this bill implements measures devised prior to the EU vote and as such fails to provide for an economy that is facing the harsh reality of Brexit, that more must be done to mitigate investor uncertainty in the oil and gas sector?
I absolutely agree. I think Brexit compounds the issues that we're seeing in the oil and gas industry, particularly in the North Sea, in terms of investment that we see. So, in terms of projects being sanctioned, and this is really key, this year we're expecting that less than £1 billion of new capital projects will be agreed. In the last 5 years, in every one of those years, we've seen an average of £8 billion of spend. That's a massive, massive drop-off. And, you know, a lot of it's to do with the global oil price, but the government has not done enough to increase investor confidence, particularly in light of Brexit. So, because of the companies having negative cash flow, they're not sanctioning new things. This means that the supply chain, and along the supply chain, we're losing jobs all the way along, we're losing contracts, we're losing expertise, and we're losing people working in the industry in and around Aberdeen and in and around Scotland and the UK. So exploration and development activities at an all-time low. Oil and Gas UK produced a report in February of this year that said that if this current trajectory of low investment and not sanctioning new projects continues, then we're going to see a fall in production in 2020. And I think that's really, really important for us to note. We're not ready for that fall in production. You know, the maximising economic recovery strategy that we have in the oil and gas industries, the oil and gas authorities' main aim is to ensure that we get as much out of the North Sea as we can. And because of the lack of investor confidence and the lack of ability to sanction new capital projects, we're seeing a major issue with that. So I think no matter what the Minister does and says in this, and I've asked various ministers about this issue, we are not seeing the investor confidence. We genuinely are seeing a major drop-off in investment, and the figures back that up. I do welcome the Oil and Gas Authority's changes, some of the changes that they've made. So one of the things that they've done is they're working on making it easier to transfer assets that are at the end of their lives. Now that's really key because we don't want decommissioning to happen quickly. We don't want decommissioning to happen now. I understand absolutely that there will be, well, hopefully, if we can get enough UK spend, there will be a financial benefit to UK companies from decommissioning, as long as we can ensure that the supply chain for decommissioning is based in the UK. However, we are going to see some of those assets reaching the end of their life. Some of those assets that have been in the North Sea for 30 years are at the end of their useful life, and they need to be decommissioned. So I welcome the push that the OGA has to ensure that as much of that spend as possible is in the UK. I think that's really important. I also welcome the push that they have to ensure that those assets can be transferred so that as much oil as possible can be recovered from each of those fields. I think those are really important. They've also been focusing on enhanced oil recovery. I don't, however, think the government's done enough on enhanced oil recovery. I think that there needs to be more done in terms of changing the tax regime around that, in order to make sure that companies are able to undertake enhanced oil recovery as much as they can. So, absolutely.
I hear her standing up doubtfully for her constituency and for the oil and gas industry in Scotland. What bemuses me is that if the independence vote had gone through, that in spring 2016 Scotland would have had an income of £100 billion and expenditures of £120 billion, a structural deficit of 20%. Now the Honourable Lady is advocating in this House tonight increasing that black hole. How would she bridge that gap?
The thing about the current structural deficit that was discussed in Jers is the fact that we are under a Westminster government right now. We do not have full control of our own economy. That is a damning indictment of the way that the Westminster government is running the economy of Scotland. I think it's incredibly important that we get independence, and we are therefore able to make decisions, for example, and particularly in the oil and gas industry, where the government has not moved quickly enough or been flexible enough in the changes that has been made. It's really important that we do that so that we can make those decisions and so that we can grow our economy, because the Westminster government is failing to do so. In terms of the future for energy, in terms of the future, particularly for the North Sea, Statoil produced a report called Energy Perspectives. And I think it's really important to look at the future for energy and think about the North Sea and the UKCS in that context. So up to 2040, Statoil predict that total primary energy demand will grow between 5% and 35%. It's a wide range because they've looked at a number of different scenarios, but in all scenarios we are seeing an increase in total energy demand. We're also seeing, Statoil predict, in 2040, energy demand to be between 78 million barrels a day and 116 million barrels a day. Currently we're using somewhere over 90. Now, it's really important to note that because we're thinking about the move towards renewables, we're thinking about different ways of energy generation. But actually, out to 2040, even in the scenario where we have a huge number of renewables, across the whole world, we are still seeing a massive demand for oil and gas. And we are still seeing a need for oil and gas to be coming out of the ground in order to support the economies in the world. So, it's really important that we make sure that the UK continues to be involved in that.
Is she aware that over half of the oil supply companies, support companies, in the UK are actually located in England, and that this amendment affects all oil companies across the UK, not just in Scotland?
I very much appreciate that point. I wasn't aware of the numbers. However, I knew that from talking to colleagues across the House who have been very supportive of companies within their constituencies and industries within their constituencies, that there was a widespread number. And actually, I think it's really important to think that what we're talking about here is UK spend. What we're talking about here is we are currently, whether we like it or not, part of the UK. And these tax changes will help all of those companies in the oil and gas industry throughout the UK, wherever it is, whether they're in Aberdeen or whether they're in Wales or the south of England or wherever. In terms of UK supply chain spend, this brings me quite nicely on. The Oil and Gas Authority have been really good at talking positively about this. And this is one of the most vital things. Although I've talked about the energy demand and the oil and gas demand out to 2040, we will see at some point a reduction in the amount of oil and gas being produced by the UK. However, it's really key to note that we are world leaders in terms of the oil and gas expertise that we have. We are very, very good at what we do. We're respected across the world. In terms of subsea technology, for example, we are 20 years ahead of America, and America haven't done very much in terms of the Gulf of Mexico extraction, and we will be there teaching America how to use subsea technology, and we will be exporting that technology to them. So even once we have a situation where oil and gas in the UK does eventually run out, we will see our expertise being able to be exported. And I think it's really important that the government acts now to ensure that we have that expertise base and that we keep it and we do not lose it in the current downturn. Yes.
I'm grateful to her for being generous. Is she saying to the House tonight, then, that the position of the Scottish National Party is to export the expertise of the Scottish hydrocarbon industry so that we can have more and more CO2 going up in the environment from fossil fuels because of, for example, the Gulf of Mexico producing more with Scottish expertise? Because if she is, that's running counter to the direction of the world in the Paris talks.
If the honourable member had listened to what I said earlier, in terms of the Statoil Energy Perspectives report, they reckon that even if we have a huge push towards renewable technologies, even if we have a huge push in terms of reducing carbon, we will still see the need for between 78 and 116 million barrels of oil a day. And that is with taking on board the very best of those technologies and increasing the very best of those technologies. We will still continue to need, for example, road surfaces, which are made from heavy oil. We will still continue to need these things, so we will always, a long way into the future until we come up with incredible alternatives. It's not just about energy, it's not just about electricity generation, it's about all of the different things that we use oil for, including plastics and things like that. In terms of exporting, I think it's really important that we do make sure that we've got a bright future in exporting. You know, I am told, I've never been, but I'm told you can't go to Houston without hearing an Aberdeen accent. Because we've got the links, and we send our experts over there, and those experts are making money for companies here. They're still employed by companies here. They are devising the technology that's being spent and being used in America and other places across the world, not just America. We find ourselves operating in the North Sea in a super mature field. This is one of the first fields in the world that is coming to that super mature status. It's one of the first. And we have got a proud history of exporting and getting incredibly good at what we do and teaching the rest of the world how to do it. We've also got a proud history of being respected around the world. Our oil and gas industry throughout the world is respected. If you say to somebody in an oil company in a different country, this technology is used in the UKCS in the North Sea, then that automatically is a gold standard and is recognised around the world. In order for us to continue to generate tax revenues from this, in order for us to continue to sustain jobs from these situations, we need to make sure that our companies have got enough cash to innovate at the moment. And what the government has done, although it's been vaguely supportive, has not been supportive enough. We're still seeing companies struggling to get venture capital. We're still seeing them struggling to get assistance from banks at this moment in time. And I'm aware that ministers have spoken to banks, but it's still not enough. The confidence is still not there to the degree that we need it to be. So what we would really like, we are the first country, as I said, operating in this super mature, one of the first countries operating in this super mature situation. We really need now a review of the taxes across the oil and gas industry. We really need, it was devised years and years ago in a totally different situation. It's had bits lumped on and bits lopped off, but it's never been looked at in the whole. And that's what we need to do now, and I very much urge the Minister to have a look at the entire tax regime for this in order that we can have a better future for our country.